It's been a long time. I'm just going to give a super quick introduction. We hope to get this out a little bit earlier, but believe me, we've been working weeks and weeks and recorded a ton of material on this whole issue of Kant and time. However, what we want to do is chop it down into maximum 1 hour segments, because that will be a bit easier for everyone, so we don't go on too long. So at the end, we're going to get an abrupt cut, and then I think in a couple of days we'll be publishing a bunch of new parts to this chapter. And we're going to go on from here, and I just want to quickly state what we will be dealing with. Obviously, Deleuze in time. This is our major focus right now. But we will be starting off with the concept of Chronos, which we followed in our last part of this chapter, and the chronological circular nature of time. And then we're gonna jump up straight into Immanuel Kant, and we are going to specifically follow our lecture in 1983 by Gilles Deleuze, which he gave in his lessons, which he did in Vincennes, the university in Paris. And I think this is a very, very rich material. This is just, if you're into this, if you follow this, this is really, really an extremely rich field. And Deleuze himself said that from his first book on Kant, Immanuel Kant, which is in 1962, it took him 30 years to be able to speak to his students and do lessons on Immanuel Kant, meaning that it took 30 years for Deleuze to really deeply understand Kant enough to be able to teach that to his students. So we will get into, this is just the beginning, and we're going to start off with Chronos, the Greek chronological nature of time. Chronos, think of chronological, your stopwatch, circular, that repeats itself, every day is a 24-hour cycle. The Earth orbits around the sun, that's a cycle. The circular nature of time. And we're going to get into the fracturing in the unhinging of that time with Immanuel Kant, and eventually Shakespeare 200 years before will kind of be with his Hamlet, the predecessor of this reversal of the Greek concept of time, where movement, time was subordinated to movement. And in the 15th century, those are the early signs with Hamlet in Shakespeare, that time is unhinged and time is no longer subordinated to movement, and it is movement or action which is subordinated to time. And in this particular part of the chapter, we'll be getting into the lecture by Deleuze, and specifically the reasoning by Kant on the reasoning behind the breakdown of time, specifically Kant's definition of reason, which is radically different from Descartes, and the illusions, according to Immanuel Kant, which are inherent to reason. And we have to keep in mind the transcendental faculties of Kant. So we have a bunch of transcendental faculties: intuition, reason, and then we have categories, and Kant is an empiricist. That's very important to remember throughout everything that we will be talking about, meaning that intuition for Kant, intuition is the intuition being affected by the empirical world, and that comes first for Kant, which is a radical break from our dear friend René Descartes. And so we will get into, in this specific chapter, Kant and reason, the illusions inherent to reason, specifically I, the self, the world, and God. Those are the three principal illusions of reason defined by Immanuel Kant. And then we'll get, even though it seems not too important, it might be the most important thing of all. And the thing of all is Deleuze talking about the importance of a concept in itself. So we spent a lot of time on the concept. We know that. We will have to get into that further, but the point here is that Deleuze, in his lecture, is saying very clearly that a concept that's worth being a concept, meaning a good concept created by a great philosopher, must affect you, and it must change your affects and your percepts. Like a general concept, it doesn't mean that you have to interpret the concept and then you will take what you want from the concept. No, Deleuze is saying very clearly in this lecture that a good concept by a great philosopher will affect you. It will cut through you. It will change your body. It will change your thinking. It will change your perceptions, etc., etc. So I just want to be brief. We're going to cut off here and expect another few chapters in upcoming days. And it should, some of the stuff is kind of complicated, but I mean, if you're really affected by these concepts, if you really understand them, if they really talk to you, some of the arguments can be very complicated, but you don't have to understand everything at first, you just have to be cool and then, follow the arguments, and it's kind of like a slow wave, that if you follow it enough and then you think about it and you take some time off and then you come back to it, you will absorb it like a sponge and you will get it. And if you get it, I mean, you will really discover the originality of Gilles Deleuze, the force of Immanuel Kant, the power of Hamlet, and later on we'll get into Kleist and Holderlin and all sorts of really interesting stuff. But just keep in mind that it's not, you don't have to understand everything. Like today, everything is a soundbite. You have to no, just take your time. You might not understand this. It'll take, and then we get to this, and then we get to this, and then after, you'll figure out in the end it's also simple and it's also beautiful. So without further ado, let's move on with our podcast here. Okay, so welcome back. We are on part 4 of the second plateau or chapter of our podcast, Deleuze Modeste. And we left off, I believe, with the concept of time, specifically looking at ancient Greek philosophy and the concepts of Chronos, Kairos, and Aeon. And then we made a leap into Deleuze's logic of sense, in which Deleuze is very explicitly developing, let's say, in a very concrete way, his concept of time. However, and obviously there's references to the Stoics, which we looked at. However, just looking at a quick timeline, Deleuze's book on the logic of sense was in 1969. Deleuze's book on Henri Bergson was published in 1966. And Deleuze's book on Immanuel Kant and philosophy was published in 1963. So in order, we're going to jump a little bit deeper into things because logically in the last part, it was very intuitive going from the Greeks and to the Stoics and therefore logic of sense. However, Deleuze had already been working, that would be 6 years before on Kant. And this is just after his first books on David Hume. Deleuze was already working very hard on conception of time, and Kant was probably, obviously Hume has a role, but Kant was probably very, very influential in this concept of the unhinging of time going off of its cardinal points. So I'm trying to move here between all these windows. And so I'm just going to take a quick look. Let's take a quick look in just some very basic preliminary concepts. So let's try to move this here. If we look up here, I can't write in this, I don't know why. But and we're talking about Chronos here. We are not talking about Kairos, and we're not talking about Aeon. We're talking about Chronos, chronological time, which to us is obviously the way we perceive time. Chronos, chronological, watch, chronology, etc., etc. So for the Greeks, what like Chronos, the way that, let's say, concrete time in the spatial world, in the empirical world, for the Greeks, time was cyclical, meaning it was a circle, and interestingly, very interestingly, this has its origins come from the Greek word catastrophe, meaning that for the Greeks, time is cyclical. It's a circle. We always go around and come back to the origin point. So if you take the word, right here, catastrophe, kata means a downwards movement or a decline, and strophe means a turning. So what this essentially meant for the Greeks in terms of Chronos is that there's order, and then there is a downwards movement. There's disorder, and then there's chaos. However, strophe means that this will turn around and we will come back to order, no? Very typical of a Greek city-state is established, and then there's order, and there's the polis, and then there's corruption, maybe a foreign army invades, and you go into a state of downwards movement into disaster. But then the war passes, and then things come back cyclically where they started from, essentially. Then order comes back, and this is kind of a cosmic cycle that we all go through. And I'm going to see right now if he would let me do a new note, and just to reinforce this, and this is really, really basic stuff, but I'm just going to write, why we have yellow, let's get some black going on here. We have Chronos, chronological time. Chronos. But time is cyclical like this. You start here, and you go here, and you go here, and you go here, and you go here, and you come back to the origin, and then that all repeats again. You start here, and you go all the way around. So, what is that silly illustration I just made? That is your wristwatch, no? We begin each day at midnight, and then we do 24 hours, and then we come back to midnight, and then the cycle starts again. So this is the circular or the cyclic nature of time. In Italian, you say domani è un altro giorno. No, what does that mean? Tomorrow is another day. So if I had a really horrific day today, I say, well, tomorrow's another day, meaning that the cycle is going to repeat, and maybe I'll have a good day tomorrow, no? And thank God for that, because time is, Chronos is cyclical, and obviously, this is not in Greek times, this is for Copernicus. However, there's obviously some kind of cyclical nature of the universe, and or maybe in Greek times that the stars revolved around the earth, and that Copernicus knows the earth that revolves about the sun, but it's all about circles, big circles and cycles. You make a full revolution around the sun nowadays, and that's a year. Maybe for the Greeks, they had another system, and they thought, the sun, the earth was at the center. But however, the only important thing is here is that to understand is that things are cyclical and therefore spherical in nature. So if we go one step further before we look into this text from Deleuze and Kant, that is in 1963, also being that we are treating with in Chronos a spatialization of time, and later on, Henri Bergson, and obviously Deleuze in his book on Bergson will challenge this spatialization of time as being an impure mixture, and will liberate time from being subordinated to movement or space. But if we're strictly speaking about Chronos, you'll have something called cardinal points, which is very important for Deleuze when he reads Kant, and also makes famously references to Shakespeare's Hamlet. So obviously, if we have a circle, we have a center, and that center you would call a hinge. So the hinge is the center of the circle, which creates the condition for time being circular, because it's always being pulled back into the center of the circle. And at the same time, you have other things which are called cardinal points. So if we just look into a purely spatial situation, I'll draw a sphere. We have north, south, east, west. Those are cardinal points. My ego or whatever, is at the center of the circle, and I have cardinal points. That is north, that is south, that is east, that is west. So time at the same point, and think about our wristwatches, has cardinal points. We have 12, and then we have 3, and then we have 6, and then we have 9. So for a spatialized version of time under Chronos, we have cardinal points just as we have for a strictly spatial compass. We have 12, 3, 6, 9, 12, and therefore we orient ourselves in time according to these cardinal points. So let's jump in really quickly into this text here about, this is directly from the preface of Deleuze and Kant in 1963, just to get a feeling for this. It's not too intuitive, and then we'll make an interesting leap into something a little bit different, but hopefully very useful. So, and I think anyone that's followed Deleuze should be familiar with this chapter. The first is Hamlet's great formula: time is out of joint. Time is out of joint. Time is unhinged. The hinges are the axis around which the door turns. Cardo in Latin, and those are cardinal points, designates the subordination of time to the cardinal points through which the periodical movements that it measures pass. So therefore, very important point and very complicated point, and we have to get into this, is that the presupposition under this regime of a spatialized time and Chronos, spatialized and circular and cyclical, is that time itself is subordinated to movement, meaning in the empirical world, things happen, everything is a movement. No, everything is always a movement. We're living beings, everything is moving, cars are moving, stars are moving. It's a crazy world out there. Everything has a tendency to move, but time is subordinated, being spatialized to measuring the movement of all, let's say, entities in the empirical world. So therefore, you walked to the park, you left at 12 p.m. and you came back at 3, so that's 3 hours. And you went dancing, you danced for 15 minutes, so you dance from 3 until 3:15. So time is subordinated to movement, and it's just a way of measuring. Essentially, you can measure it spatially. If you go dancing, we can say you went 3 meters, and then you went 2 meters here north, and then you went, over here, and then blah, blah, blah. At the same time, time in a chronological sense is subordinated to movement, meaning it is just a simple means of measuring your movement throughout time. So I think that should be pretty easy to understand. This was the view of ancient philosophy. So, of course, we do know this, but time out of joint signifies the reversal of the movement-time relationship. It is now movement which is subordinate to time. Everything changes, including movement. We move from one labyrinth to another. The labyrinth is no longer a circle or a spiral, which would translate its complications, but a thread, a straight line, all the more mysterious for being simple, inexorable, as Borges says, the labyrinth which is composed of a single straight line, and which is indivisible, incessant. Time is no longer related to the movement which it measures, but movement is related to the time which conditions it. This is the first great Kantian reversal in the critique of pure reason. So The highlight here, the important point, is essentially time is no longer related to the movement which it measures, and this begins with Shakespeare's Hamlet and also in the philosophy of Immanuel Kant, specifically in the Critique of Pure Reason. But movement is related to the time which conditions it. And this is the first great Kantian reversal. And so, from this premise, we're going to make a kind of strange jump into a course held by Gilles Deleuze at Vincennes, where he taught. This course was from 1983. And let me dig up the title here because it is important. Let's see if I can find that. All of my dumb and embarrassed stuff. Here we go. The course was called Vérité et temps, le faussaire. That means the truth and time and the false at the same time. And, well, we won't go through the whole course. It kind of touches on these themes in a simplistic way, but what it does show is the origins of, this idea, this concept of time being unhinged. So, if I can just try and do another simple sketch here. Let's see. In his preface to the book on Immanuel Kant, Deleuze is essentially saying that time is a revolving door. So I'll draw a circle in perspective and another circle. And I have my axis, which guarantees the revolution. And then obviously this is very, very literal. Don't take it too literally, but let's say we're gonna have hinges connecting our revolving door to its central axis. That's how revolving doors work. And in this door, well, how do you do that? Let's say this is the door right here, and you can walk in, and then this door is very slowly going to continuously revolve like that. So Deleuze is saying, beginning with Hamlet and specifically Immanuel Kant, this concept of time as a revolving door. The hinges, these hinges will become undone, and therefore time will liberate itself from this circular concept. And in this lecture, it might be a little difficult. Let's give it a shot. Deleuze is going to explain in a very simple way the reasons for this, and I think it's very important to understand, and it obviously has a lot to do with Kant's reading and criticism of René Descartes and the conditioning of the self, which eventually, according to Kant, will be determined by time. And in his opinion, that was something that Descartes had kind of overlooked or didn't take into account, the role of time in conditioning the self. I think, therefore, I am essentially, Kant will say, well, yeah, that's great, that's not enough. You don't have a condition to say that you have no right to say that you're missing something. And for Kant, that something that is missing will be time itself. So what we can do is look in our slide over here, but I've prepared, where is this? Good luck. I prepared one of our silly AI reconstructions in which, ironically, we have a AI created Immanuel Kant, who looks pretty handsome, and he's going to be reading in English the original text in French from Gilles Deleuze in 1983. But as silly as it seems, I think it's going to help make this a lot easier to understand. So let's try and listen to Mr. Kant. Hello, let's see what you have to say. This is one of the paragraphs concerning that course and the revolution, as Deleuze states, which Immanuel Kant performs in philosophy, introducing time as a fundamental element. So let's go.
I'm aware of them. Bearing for them gives a certain state of the illusion. Well, very well, we say. But then this is what had to be done. If you want, it is never enough when a philosopher, and there have already begun if I want to talk about it. It is never enough when a philosopher wants to read any more than a poet or when anyone else. It is never enough reading the letter of the text. I need to understand this letter. It is true that the letter is dead. It is true that the letter is dead as long as you have not grasped something. Let us call it, for the moment, the order of the effective. What I call it the order of the effective. It is just a strangeness, kind of strangeness. We will have to ask ourselves what means such strangeness, the strangeness underlying philosophical propositions.
Okay, so let's go over here onto our PowerPoint slide. Obviously, this is very colloquial. This is Gilles Deleuze talking to his students, so it's a little bit unrevised. And Deleuze is saying, here is a man, meaning Immanuel Kant, a philosopher, who comes to tell you, you no longer dispel the illusions of which you are victims with the help of reason. But Immanuel Kant comes to tell you, reason in its vigilance, reason as right reason, creates illusions that you necessarily fall into. So the fundamental point here is that for the faculty of reason, for Immanuel Kant, is a kind of vigilance. Reason is not like it was with Descartes, in which reason is the truth, and you're in darkness, and through reason, you discover, the truth, the absolute truth. Kant, reacting to Descartes, is saying look, reason is a faculty that is vigilant, which kind of guides things, but in itself, reason is not absolute reason. It's not absolute truth. And Deleuze here says you can call it a fantastic revolution. So that's why I wanted to go back to this lesson which Deleuze gave at Vincennes in 1983, many years later, on Kant students, and he says this is a massive revolution, because up until Immanuel Kant, reason represented the pure, the truth, the good, and instead Immanuel Kant is saying, look, reason is transcendental faculty which has its powers, but at the same time reason also has its own illusions. Reason in itself, if you grasp reason, is not a guarantee that you're grasping truth. It's kind of like a force, a guideline. It guides thought, no, but it is in itself. It is absolutely not a guarantee of truth in itself. So does that mean be against reason? No, there are others who can draw this consequence. Kant, not at all. So right here, Deleuze is saying, so does that mean we should just, say, fuck reason? Let's all be unreasonable and, whatever. No, Deleuze is clearly saying other people can fall into that trap and be simplistic. If you really understand Immanuel Kant, you know that reason is a faculty, an important faculty. However, it does have its limits, and you have to be aware of that, and you have to accept them. These illusions are unavoidable, but you must become aware of them, bearing for them to give a certain status of illusion. So you always have to accept reason will always bring about a certain la faussaire, a certain amount of illusion in your reasoning. You can, take nowadays, think about the flat earthers. I mean, they have reasons, no? I mean, they're logically saying, well, all the pictures, I'm not familiar with flat earthers. Maybe it's a bad example. They say, no, it's really flat, and those pictures were all invented, but they're using reason to create their argument, no? But, I mean, their reasons clearly have led them into a series of illusions. So reason is kind of a mental tool we use to figure things out, but there's no guarantee whatsoever that reason on its own will lead you to the truth. Well, very well. If we say, but, then this is what had to be done. If you want, it is never enough when a philosopher, and there I have already begun what I want to talk about today. It is never enough when a philosopher wants to read, any more than when a poet or when anyone else. It is never enough to read the letter of the text. And even to understand this letter, it is true that the letter is dead. So that's a little bit complicated. Let's jump back into French. No, that translation is accurate. I think what Deleuze is saying here is that, you can't read a text by the letter, meaning you can't just read the words and understand the words, and therefore, he's saying if you're a philosopher, if you're a writer, if you're anyone, he's saying, Deleuze, it's true that the letter, la lettre est morte, that the letter is dead. So, those are printed words on a text in a certain sense. They're dead. You can't just accept everything, you read at face value. You have to have a certain relationship with what you're reading. You have to have a certain passion. You have to have a certain intuition, a certain feeling, and you get it and you understand it, but you go beyond it, and I think that is what Deleuze is essentially saying here. So it is true that the letter is dead as long as you have not grasped something. Let us call it for the moment of the order of the affective, affective, extremely important, what I call the order of the affective. It is the strangeness, a kind of strangeness. We will have to ask ourselves what means such strangeness. The strangeness underlying philosophical propositions, and in Deleuzian terms, these can be either affects or percepts. And essentially, summing this up, what Deleuze is saying is that you can read a text word for word and, use your faculty of reason or whatever and say, oh yeah, that's all good and cool. But what really counts are the affects that text is how you're affected, and no affects, percepts, how you're perceiving, how you're affected. You as an individual entity is not Immanuel Kant. We know we're going into a becoming if you're really interested with Immanuel Kant, and therefore you will be affected by him, and therefore the text will not be a series of dead letters. And okay, so we're gonna get Immanuel Kant, our dear friend, to read us the second part of this, which should give us a deeper insight on how this idea, let's say, reason in itself being susceptible to the false is a radical revolution in the history of philosophy, and this will eventually lead to the notion of time. So let's let Manu go through the second part.
Where does this idea come from that easily generates illusions? That reason in individuals, once again, is not the sleepy reason that generates monsters. It is the vigilant reason that generates hallucinations, illusions. It goes without saying that the whole problem of truth is shaken up. If I find out where it came from, it will still be a confirmation for our research. But we don't have to have this problem. If I can there, why not? But it won't even advance me. Since you don't care, you don't lose track. Well, if you wonder where this idea comes from, illusions of reason, we'll see that it comes from a new conception of time. It's a new conception of time. It is because Kant makes and imposes a new conception of time. That therefore, reason can no longer be considered a system guarantee or a system denunciation of illusions, but as self-generating illusions.
Okay, thank you very much, Manu. And let's just run through this very quickly and see how this leads into not only a revolution of reason itself, but necessarily involving a revolution of our conception of time in itself. So Deleuze says that's weird, huh? And where does this idea come from? Where can this idea come from that reason generates illusions? So once again, Kant is a pretty proper Cartesian, uppity German dude, and then it's kind of weird. It is strange that this pops into Kant's philosophy, which, as Deleuze has stated in the Abécédaire, which you can find on YouTube, K for Kant. Kant creates this terrifying cathedral of judgment and logic and reason. However, Deleuze is saying, isn't that weird that at the same time, and in this the monument of logic and reason and judgment and punishment, this idea pops up here that reason in itself is necessarily creates illusions. Okay, that reason in its vigilance, once again, is not the sleep of reason that generates monsters. It is the vigilance of reason that generates hallucinations, illusions. it goes without saying that the whole problem of truth is shaken up. If I wonder where it came from, it will still be a confirmation for our research, but we don't have to have this problem. If I can there, why not? But it won't even advance me since you don't care, you don't lose track. Once again, he's talking to his students. This is a very colloquial conversation. Well, if you wonder where this idea comes from, illusions of reason, we'll see that it comes from a new conception of time. It's a new conception of time. It is because Kant makes and imposes a new conception of time that, therefore, reason can no longer be considered as the simple guarantee or as the simple denunciation of illusions, but as itself generating illusions. Okay, so moving on. First off, I've just noticed that the last two presentations by Immanuel Kant had a lot of echo, and I apologize for that. I believe I have discovered the reason for that, and it won't happen again. And what we're going to do is we're going to continue with this lecture to his students in 1983 at Vincennes, the Université de Vincennes by Gilles Deleuze on Kant, time, and le faussaire. And the point being is that, it's one thing to just say, Deleuze says time is out of joint and time is completely changed under Kant. But it's another whole issue to understand in a simple philosophical sense why. And that's why I'm going to kind of stick to this lecture, which I find very, very valuable, as I do find extremely valuable all of the recorded classes by Gilles Deleuze, which have been transcribed and recorded online. And, we want to get to the basic, the heart of the question, which, as always, seems extremely complicated, but in the end, it's quite simple. And Deleuze, we know, is very rigorous on philosophy and the history of philosophy. So I'm going to keep going on with a lecture here. We saw a little bit ago that this idea that reason necessarily embodies illusion within itself as a transcendental faculty for Gilles Deleuze is the basis of the unhinging of time. So that is kind of the origin, and we're going to look into that a little bit further. So let's see if we can get the echo out and get our dear friend Emmanuel to read us the next part. So I'm going to shut down this here.
And what is illusion as an illusion of reason, as an illusion engendered by reason? It is above all the illusion as engendered by reason. It is, I will say, it is what, much later, phenomenology was to call the horizon. The horizon, the world, the self, God are three forms of the horizon and therefore inseparable. Illusions are always the illusions of the horizon. Here is that the whole real is plunged, all the real implies a horizon, but this horizon, it merges with the illusions of reason.
Okay, so hopefully I should be back. You are hearing me. And let's go into our PowerPoint slide, which is on the lower left. And what Manu just told us was, let's look in the translation. And unfortunately, that was only half of it, so I'm going to have to add the other half. My apologies again. But what we have here, and what is illusion as an illusion of reason, as an illusion engendered by reasons? Reason engenders illusion in itself. It is above all the illusion as engendered by reason. It is, I will say, it is what much later, very important here, what phenomenology was to call the horizon. The horizon, the world, the self, God, are three forms of the horizon and therefore inseparable. So this is under Immanuel Kant, and what we are essentially saying is that this will be discovered centuries forward by the phenomenologists, is that reason presupposes a horizon, and therefore the world, self, and God, this is the 17th century, so God is included, are all to be considered for Immanuel Kant as horizons. Illusions are always the illusions of the horizon. Here is that whole real is plunged. All the real implies a horizon. But this horizon, it merges with the illusions of reasons. Once again, it's a very powerful statement, honestly. Let's just take reason. For Immanuel Kant, reason in itself is not the truth, which pre-Kant, Descartes, reason was, absolute truth. But Kant is saying that reason, the faculties, the world, the self, and God are horizons, a horizon, and the whole of the real is plunged in this horizon. Once you get to transcendental metaphysics, transcendental, not transcendent, transcendental, Immanuel Kant is saying that you have to deal with a horizon, essentially meaning that the faculties in themselves are susceptible to illusions, essentially, and we looked at that a moment ago. Let's see what I actually missed from this text here. Okay. Alors, en effet, therefore, effectively, your point of view is not false. However, we are fully in a falsified narration. Kant, he could not say that. This is Gilles Deleuze, like the students. Kant would never have said that. Kant could never have said that. Kant said, il ne faut pas dissiper. It is not necessary to dissipate the illusion. You do not, eliminate the illusion completely, in contrast to Descartes. However, he says we have to take into our conscience the illusion as it is in itself. So, our faculty of reason has a horizon. and our faculty of reason is not necessarily in itself a guarantee of philosophical or metaphysical or truth, and it tends within its own nature to lead us to create illusions. However, we do not need to eliminate those illusions. What we need to do is to retain in our consciousness the illusions in themselves. C'est dire en tant que tel. Ça veut dire quoi? En tant que tel. So, moving forward. So, meaning, Deleuze says, that means en tant que tel, meaning the illusion in itself. Ça veut dire quoi? That means what? It means, what does it mean? What does it mean to take into your conscience the illusion as itself in your consciousness? En tant qu'elle est engendrée par la raison, so far as it is engendered by reason. Le moi, le monde et Dieu sont les trois illusions que la raison engendre. The moi, the me, le monde, the world, et Dieu, God, are the three illusions that reason as a transcendental faculty engenders within itself. Okay, so moving along with Manu, we will read the next part. And props to Manu. Let's go.
So, yes, it's not wrong your point of view, but we are right in a falsified narrative. Kant, he cannot say that, he will never say that. He will say that the illusion should not be dispelled, but that he should become aware of it as such. That is to say, as such, it means what? To become aware of the illusion as such. As it is generated by reason. The I, the world and God are the three illusions that reason generates. So, yes, it's not wrong your point of view.
Drag the audio back up here. Sorry about that. Oh, there we go. So just very quickly here, before we move on. So yes, it's not wrong, your point of view. That is your point of view. But we are right in a falsified narrative. So once we obtain truth, we discovered with Kant that the narrative is itself falsified. And Deleuze is saying here, Kant, he cannot say that. He will never say that. Obviously, such a serious philosopher would never say something, like we live in falsified narratives, essentially. Kant will simply make his point and state that the illusion that reason inherently within itself generates should not be dispelled. So Kant is saying you do not take that illusion and discard it. So this is the big jump from Descartes to Kant. Descartes is saying you make errors, but through reason you eliminate errors and you eliminate illusions, and reason will bring you to the truth. And Kant, Deleuze is saying, is not going all the way, saying, okay, you as a philosopher discover your ultimate truth. However, the whole narrative was falsified because reason is no guarantee of truth. Reason is very susceptible to being taken over by illusion, but obviously Kant could not go all of the way and say that as Deleuze did. But Kant, however, said that a philosopher always has to keep in mind, understand the illusions, and not just dispel them. You have to understand the nature of the illusions themselves in order to overcome the irrational. That is to say, as such, it means that to become aware of the illusion as such, as it is generated by reason. So the illusion as such, as stated by Immanuel Kant, means that illusions are generated by reason. The I, the world, and God are three illusions that reason generates. So once again, very short paragraph here, but it's a pretty heavy one. What Deleuze is essentially saying is that the I, le moi, the world, le monde, and God, Dieu, are illusions that reason generates, and obviously time will be a substantial part of this argument the further we go along. So moving along, and I would just like to mention that one of the reasons that we are, amongst others, spending a long time on this cours de Deleuze Vincennes is also because, as we will now see, that before we get into, the unhinging, the rupture of time under Immanuel Kant, Deleuze also speaks heavily about the concept and affects and percepts, and I think in previous podcasts we've talked a lot about concepts and conceptual personae. So that's kind of, we should always keep that as a kind of kit or a backpack that we always have to keep. We looked a little bit into Deleuze's concept of the concept and perceptual, conceptual personae, etc., etc. And these are things that we always have to keep present while we study Deleuze, because we will enrich those ideas, and we want to study Deleuze in coexistence with what we've learned so far from Deleuze, specifically concerning the nature of the concept in this case. So I'm going to try and go back to Manu here and let him read this next part.
A long time ago, I have the impression that we were still in Vincennes, and as I am now taking care of it, I would like to get something out of it again. I couldn't come up with the idea of talking about Kant, it was because of the note I was given, but I came up with the idea of how to read philosophers. Because, once again, and you will see how it fully relates to our subject. That's basically the whole theme I would like to shoot on today, is that we don't understand at all what it is that philosophy when we define it simply as an art or a discipline of concepts, and yet it is that. It is then that I cling to what was said the last time about Nietzsche, but philosophy is something else, because a concept, if you treat a concept alone, well, it does not have much interest, it is satisfying for the intelligence, and then, you gotta like it. And why
Let's bring our audio back up, hopefully to a decent level. We'll try that here. Hopefully you can hear me right now. And so I think at this point, the important point is Deleuze is quite candid here, and is talking about his relationship to philosophy, and the concept in itself is not as appealing, like Manu just explained to us very eloquently, that it's the concept alone is just a pure act of intelligence, but for Deleuze that is not the role neither of philosophy nor of the concept. So if we look at what he said here, And why I say, but you don't mind that I start there instead of linking it to, I would like then to finish, since we are on the move, I would like to pick up a point. A few years ago, I had tried, a long time ago, I have the impression that we were still in Vincennes, and as I am now taking care of it, I would like to get something out of it again. I couldn't come up with the idea of talking about Kant, and this is why the course was in 1983. And if we go back to a timeline, 1963 to 1983, what is that? 30 plus 60. Yeah, that's many decades later, at least. And Deleuze is saying here that after having initially wrote the book in 1963, in his teachings, his lectures, he couldn't figure out a way how to talk about Kant. And it was because of the note I was given. But I came up with the idea of how to read philosophers, because once again, and you will see how it fully relates to our subject, that's basically the whole theme I would like to shoot on today, is that we don't understand at all what it is that philosophy is when we define it simply as an art or a discipline of concepts. So we know in What is Philosophy, very famously, Deleuze and Guattari defined philosophy as the creation of concepts. However, Deleuze is saying here in 1983 that as long as we simply define philosophy as an art or a discipline, we can also say creation of concepts, and yet it is that. So that is philosophy, obviously. It is then that I cling to what was said the last time about Nietzsche. But philosophy is something else, because a concept, if you treat a concept alone, well, it does not have much interest. It is satisfying for the intelligence, and then you gotta like it. That's you gotta like it. That's a bizarre kind of a street translation, but here's the original French text, c'est satisfaisant pour l'intelligence, et puis voilà, et encore il faut aimer ça. So yeah, it's basically the same thing. It's if you just take philosophy, as an appreciation, or you accept it as the art or discipline of concepts, that's all great. And that's going to satisfy your faculty of intelligence. And then, voila, you are going to love it for being that. So in our brutal English translation, it was you gotta like it, and that's essentially what Deleuze was saying. Philosophy, wow, all these concepts. So let's read these concepts, and my intelligence is satisfied. I'm so smart. I'm so great. I'm so cool, etc., etc. And then you're kind of forced into liking it.